To give you an example, by the way, is on the attack surface, and starting May, we started to get some information. RDP, 50% increase in open ports, almost 1 million attacks now on the US daily on RDP. There's 10% more SSH open ports. In the survey that we did of 100 CISOs, 35% of them are moving faster to the cloud, and when you move fast, there's problems behind because it takes time to fix security. 8% are reducing their security measures. 21% of them actually have less budget. So they need to do more with less. So if you look at all of this, the attack surface is actually growing. Also from asking, we asked the 100 CISOs, what are you seeing more than usual? Phishing and the malware emails were, of course, number one. That's the easiest way for an attacker. But it was quite interesting to see that at least in the US, they're already seeing nation state and internals to be about higher than the usual scale of them. And if we look a little bit about Zoom, we've been asking a lot about this critical infrastructure. It's interesting, I just saw that Zoom value is more than the top 10 airlines together now, which is completely crazy. But if you look at it, we were asked to see if Zoom was weakened to allow a nation state, in this case China, to abuse it. After looking at the code itself, after looking at the different breaches reported, we don't think that's the case. We think it's the case of a bad security design by a company who didn't care about security. But we didn't see any indication of a nation state deliberately changing things. There is one thing that is interesting, which is there is a component called the Zoom router. This is where the calls from two sides meet, and this is where both the encryption keys and the encrypted data resides. There were instances where calls between two parties in the US were routed through a Zoom router in China. This would allow an advanced attacker to collect the voice or the video without actually compromising, weakening the encryption, or having backdoors. Since version 5, you can know what's the server that is currently serving you, so you should monitor this. And if you're big enough, you can actually buy your own Zoom router from Zoom. We know some customers that are actually doing this, and they can control the routing. Bottom line, if you want to say something that you would not feel comfortable sending on an unencrypted email, do not use Zoom. If you have specific problem with this specific nation state, do not use Zoom. For anything else, use Zoom. And as an evidence, Team8 is still using Zoom for everything that we believe is not mission critical or secretive. On phishing and malware, we've seen a lot of this, 6x more than before. But to be honest, this is what we call the opportunistic phase. The interesting part is what we call the systematic phase, in which we all understood that people should work from home is not a terrible idea. And this would make more and more people use VDI. And in the past, we usually gave VDI to least privileged. Now we're giving VDI also to people with high privileges. This, for me as an attacker, means that this is the right time to start develop tools to circumvent VDI. Until this point, it was easier just to attack your network. But now it makes more sense ROI-wise. To be completely honest here, VDI is not a security measure. Although it's isolation, it's an IT tool. For me as an attacker, it was never a problem. If the user can move the mouse, I can also move the mouse in the name of the user. Actually, what it means for you, security professional, is that if you're running a VDI on a machine that you do not control, you have less visibility into what's going on the machine. You lack context, which means that it's going to be harder for you to understand if it's an attacker controlling the mouse or your user. I would say one word about ransom. Ransom business currently is good. There's an increase in the amount of the people are actually collecting. The interesting part for me in ransom is how it's going to develop. Currently, ransom is about taking your content from you, but actually there's a new way of doing ransom. Instead of taking your content, I can take your employees from you. Your employees are using VPN, your employees are connecting to most of the large organization. If I can disable those VPN using a DDoS, and those VPN servers are using the same technology, TLS, like any web server, I can use DDoS to disconnect your employees from your enterprise. Unfortunately, most of your DDoS defenses are on your internet facing for customers and not for your VPN. This is something you should consider. Last word, and then I'm going to move to Ofer. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. Unfortunately, this is not only a medical crisis, this is also a financial crisis. And where there's a financial crisis and people are let go, there are more insiders. It's going to be even harder to notice those insiders since they're working from home. So if you don't have the right security measures, you're not going to see them. Ofer is going to cover a little bit more about what it means and why it happened.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Asaf. So we're going to continue talking about one of the biggest threats on the horizon, which is the insider threat spike that's coming our way across the globe. So when we talk about insider threats, we're clearly talking about those individuals that are stealing data or performing some type of sabotage internal to the company. In this case, we're going to be talking about those with a malicious intent, those that intended to actually harm the company as opposed to non-malicious insider threats. When we look at how this graph on the right-hand side plays out in terms of the number of these types of attacks, we can see we have some historic data and we have some anticipated data. Over the last couple of years, insider threats have been significantly on the rise. So this is not a new problem. More and more employees are stealing information from companies. There are things like China's 1,000 Talent program, where they're recruiting people to actually do this on their behalf, and obviously many other means. What we believe is coming during the COVID period is a large increase in the number of these guys out there. And the reasons are really broken up into two: motivation and opportunity. And from a motivational perspective, we all follow the news. We see the financial pressure that's out there. People are losing jobs, or they're concerned they're going to lose jobs. They need to make ends meet, and that obviously always drives activity to do so. Secondly, what's interesting about this specific crisis is the emotional detachment. And when you think about everybody suddenly working from home, no longer are people as connected to the company as they were the day prior, right? People are now sitting at home. They don't see their peers on a day-to-day basis. They don't have their happy hour every week in the company and so on. So they're somewhat detached from the company, which obviously makes it easier to attack the organization. From an opportunity perspective, again, a couple of interesting items in regards to COVID. First is, if somebody's working from home, one of the biggest inhibitors of stealing data would be people looking over their shoulder. And now that they're working from home, that doesn't exist. So if I'm in the office, I never know who sees my screen, when they see my screen, and I'm afraid of being caught. Now I'm sitting in my basement, nobody sees me, nobody sees my activity, and I can go out and do whatever I'd like to privately. Obviously, these people know it's a chaotic work environment, and in respect to that, people aren't noticing what's actually happening. So we understand on the attack side of things how things are progressing. What does that mean from a defender's perspective? What are the odds of us catching these attackers? And unfortunately, we see a large dip that we anticipate during the COVID period, as is denoted in that blue line. And the couple reasons for that is that, first of all, if we think about running our business, it's anything but business as usual today. People are less efficient, people are stressed, fatigued, they can't perform their job as well as they did the day prior, which obviously results in noticing less of the stuff they should be noticing. Secondly, is that there is no normal. And so many of the insider threat programs have been based on anomaly detection. So these are the systems that are out there baselining or saying what is normal, learning what is normal, and then any deviation from that normal, they will flag as an anomaly, and by doing so, catch this type of activity. Unfortunately, there is no normal. Everything's changed overnight, right? We took all of our workforce and overnight told them, go out and work at home. Share your responsibility with your spouse. So you might work erratic hours, and if yesterday you worked until 5, now maybe you're picking up work in the evening again, and so on. So there is nothing to base our learning pattern on, because there is nothing there that we can actually use as a baseline. All this together generates what we call the COVID gap, which basically, if we again look at the information, you can see that in the 2008 crisis, the last huge financial crisis, there was a 73% increase in insider threat activity. We have the financial crisis now. That's very likely in its own right to drive that type of activity. We see over the last couple of years, 47% increase in insider threat activity before COVID, right? So before COVID, more and more of these people were doing this. Obviously now with all of the factors we mentioned earlier, that just increases that chance. When we zoom into now, we have a 200% unemployment increase over the 2008 crisis. So what does that mean when we couple that information? If people attack anyway under a financial crisis, how much of that is going to be done now? And from a defender standpoint, there's a 300% increase in false positives because of that no normal factor I mentioned earlier. So all that together creates this COVID gap. We have more attackers, more insider threat, less opportunity to actually catch them. And that, we believe, is a huge problem companies are going to face in the upcoming period. We believe that insider threat is one of the biggest security challenges that companies are about to face. They're already facing it to an extent. We think it's going to get a whole lot worse. There's many approaches to go about fixing this problem. Some of them have just lost efficacy completely given our current working situation. Yet fortunately, with the world of deception, we think there is a good means to actually thwart this type of attack.
So yeah, my name's Adam, and I'm VP of Cybersecurity Services at Signia, really acting as a trusted advisor to many of our clients across the globe. And for those of you who don't know Signia, we're an elite cyber consulting and incident response company. And what we're going to do over the next few minutes is just to have a discussion around some of the insights that we're seeing from the cyber front lines, and to share some of our ideas around adapting cyber resilience to today's emerging threat landscape. And really throughout the COVID-19 situation, we at Signia have engaged companies worldwide, both in incident response situations as well as holding many discussions with our clients to really understand the specific challenges and dilemmas that they are facing now, and to support them with these challenges. And I think what we've seen through these discussions was that many clients who had rapidly transitioned to remote and working, or adopted or hastened the deployment of new technologies such as cloud or collaboration tools, were at least to some extent struggling to adapt or forced to temporarily lower or bend their security guardrails in order to support their business operations. And even where companies themselves made a relatively seamless transition, third parties who they worked with may not have made such an easy transition. So really, in this context, our efforts at Signia over the last weeks have been both around supporting our clients post-transition to map the key changes to their perimeter and work to define a set of prioritized activities, and secondly, handling major incident response efforts. And as I'm sure you can imagine, incident response in the current situation when many company team members are working from home does present companies with certain unique challenges. And throughout this journey, what we've done is to really develop a set of activities for consideration as we begin to return to the new normal and restrictions are eased. And I'm going to hand over to Daniel now, who's one of our technology leaders, and he's just going to touch on a few of these areas, and then we'll open up for feedbacks and discussions. So Daniel, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Hi everyone. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about what we believe organizations should focus on, or to the type of questions organizations should be asking themselves in light of the transition to remote work and the change in the threat landscape. The first area is, of course, the perimeter and understanding whether the new perimeter is as secure as the pre-COVID-19 one. That's probably the most important question to ask, given the fact that the perimeter has changed with new systems adopted, existing systems reconfigured, and the boundaries of the perimeter being different now that it doesn't begin at the data center any longer, but it begins at people's homes with their personal networks and their personal devices. So the way an organization looks to an outsider is completely different. And when you're thinking about the perimeter, the primary thing you want to consider is remote access solutions like Citrix, VDI, VPN, because they're the primary method for anyone from the outside to get in. And this is, of course, something that adversaries understand as well. And the strongest testament to that is probably the large spike that we've observed in the past month or month and a half in the amount of RDP brute force attempts and perimeters being scanned to detect misconfigured or unpatched VPN services. So when thinking about remote access solutions, organizations are looking to have a diligent review around the configuration, the hardening, understanding whether the software is up to date, whether the underlying operating systems is patched, which users and which devices can access and under which condition, and what type of inbound access into the networks do these solutions provide once a user is already authenticated. Asaf mentioned the fact that now it is possible to completely disrupt an organization with the majority or all of the workforce at home with a denial of service attack against remote access solutions. So denial of service protections against remote access solutions are also something that's important to consider. And last thing around the perimeter is that it's important to understand that third parties are also part of your perimeter. And of course, in case they have access to your environment. If they do, your perimeter is only as secure as theirs. And just a few weeks ago, we began an incident response effort where an organization reached out to us because they were breached as a result of a third party that they used being breached due to the third party lowering security guardrails around their VPN. So with regards to third parties, we recommend thinking about which organizations or which third parties have connectivity into your systems, what type of access do they have, and are they taking the appropriate measures to make sure that they aren't increasing your attack surface. I'm just going to briefly go over some of the other focus areas we recommend our organizations to think about. So one primary focus area is around adapting security plans and procedures, primarily incident response to the dispersed workforce. We as an incident response company are experiencing some of the challenges that have to do with responding to incidents with the dispersed workforce due to the fact that communication and reporting channels are different and not always well defined, due to the fact that it's more difficult to create operational tension and a sense of urgency now that people are not together in the same war room. The exchanging of information, of data and forensic artifacts with remote responders is different from the situation when responders are on site. Other measures to consider are around the operations of SOC, restoring backups, onboarding new devices and employees, and of course considering the rise that Asaf mentioned earlier in the threat of the internal attacker, and thinking about DLP solutions and processes having to do with revoking or granting permissions. Application security and application portfolios need to be reprioritized due to messaging and collaboration applications and other platforms like cloud solutions and cloud infrastructures being introduced into organizations' ecosystems as part of the transition to remote work. So this requires a more diligent review around the security configuration of these solutions. Maintaining visibility is different now that there are different crown jewels, that attackers behave differently, and that systems are used in a different manner. So we need to optimize visibility around the new crown jewels. We need to make sure that we're familiar with how today in the era of remote work, system administrators administer systems to be able to more easily distinguish between a malicious actor connecting through the VPN to a system or through any other means, and between a system administrator that is connecting from their home into one of the sensitive or crown jewels of the organization. And the last focus area is around maintaining employee awareness With the tremendous rise in social engineering attempts and the lowering of security guardrails around the perimeter, the importance of employee awareness increases. So a lot of organizations are taking measures to increase employee awareness and think about what employees can do to be more vigilant, not only around their corporate assets and their corporate devices, but also around their personal networks, their personal accounts, as they are also potentially a target for adversaries looking to gain a foothold within the environment due to the fact that the same device and the same network is used for both personal purposes and corporate purposes. And of course, help desk are always a lucrative target for an adversary looking to phish for credentials or to gain access. So help desk also specifically need to remain vigilant and diligent in the way they authenticate any request coming in, despite the unusual amount of requests that they're getting now that people are at home. I just talked over some of the key measures that we believe organizations should consider, but of course, within each and every area that you're seeing in the slide in front of you, there's a wide gamut of measures to consider, and of course, they should be contextualized to the unique characteristics of each and every single organization. So the slide that you're seeing right now, we're happy to share with you at the end. And if you're familiar with any specific challenges that pertain to your organization across any of these areas, we'll be happy to have an ad hoc discussion on it, and feel free to reach out and send an email in case you have any questions.
And guys, so look, we just gave you sort of an overview. These are the kind, this is the kind of sessions that we have with professionals around the world. Again, trying to tell them what we have learned and are learning and hear from them. So far we've spoken to over 100 CISOs around the world, some of them from the Team8 village, some of them from other places. I believe that this is something that cannot be done locally because the attackers are not local. And so creating this global village and sharing information, best practices, etc., is vital to keep our network secure. Many of the enterprise governments, people, etc., are already at Plan B. And if they get attacked, they have to go to Plan C. Many of us don't have a Plan C. So this is vital.
Well, thank you very much to all of you. My personal feeling is that this is frightening, because I'm looking from the perspective of an organization, and we are, on one hand, we are a local organization here in Israel, but we belong to an international organization with 140 offices all over the world, and in each of our country representatives and CEOs of the bilateral chambers have member companies in their territories who are all in the same situation, because COVID-19, if one thing happened, is that it made us all very similar in the challenges and in the chances and in the fears, and also in the measures that we are about to take. And what you just presented here is quite frightening. I especially looked at the aspect of insider threats, because the fact is that the emotional detachment over 2 or 3 months, when you are not really as a team together, but you are only meeting on Zoom or wherever, makes differences also in the minds of people. And I think it would be very important for those who feel the same to reach out to you, to your guys, and see what actually we could do, because many of us are no CISOs. We are CEOs. We are responsible for the whole organization. We've got to be sure that the security aspects are in good hands.
Thank everybody again, and thank you for taking the time. We're happy to assist you or portfolio companies, etc. And Elroy, thanks again for arranging this.
Well, thank you, Nadav, very much. Thank you to back to New York and all of you who participated. We are just right in time. This was 60 minutes on security threats in COVID-19 times and after. I'm very happy that we could do that. And I think that many of my colleagues who have, part of them, hundreds and even thousands of member companies in their territories, will have a closer look at the decks and might be able to get you also into contact to member companies that might face the same threats and the challenges and are contemplating which way to go about them. So thank you very much to all of you, to Team8, to the family of the chambers, to the companies. Be well, be healthy, and be good. Thank you and goodbye.